Our next speaker is Democratic candidate for Secretary of State in Arizona, Terry Goddard. Record of public service as Arizona's Attorney General, Mayor of Phoenix, federal housing official, CAP board member, and teacher to the Secretary of State's office. Wow, that was a real mouthful. As Arizona's Attorney General, he received national recognition for his work protecting Arizona consumers and vows to do the same for Arizona voters. Terry is a veteran of the United States Navy and a graduate of Arizona State University's School of Law. Currently, he's a senior counsel with the international law firm of Dentons. He lives in downtown Phoenix with his wife Monica and teenage son. So along similar lines to the question I asked Michele, my question is, many students have expressed concerns with the difficulty of voting. If elected, how will you make voting more accessible to students who are making a large percentage of the electorate today? Specifically for out-of-state students, though, and the fact that it is difficult for them not being registered voters over here to have more access to voting. You have 5 minutes, Terry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And whoa, thank you all for being here. I think the first answer to your question is the folks that are here today, the enthusiasm and the interest that you have in Arizona politics. And so that's a building block. But the last time I checked, there were about 80,000 other students at ASU. So we've got a ways to go outside of this room to truly get students and people under 30 involved in politics. And I use that number advisedly. Arizona has, I hate to be too categorical about that, but done a terrible job of making it possible, easy for individuals to vote. And that has been through both omission and commission over the last multiple years, over 20 years at least. Secretaries of State and the legislature have worked together to make it harder and harder and harder for individuals to exercise the most precious right we have as Americans, and that is the fundamental right to vote. We're 46th in the nation in voter turnout, 4 from the bottom, and we're falling. That's a despicable record. It's one that we have to change, because the fewer people that participate, the more the rest of them feel that the system isn't working. And frankly, the system isn't working for an awful lot of them. So let me be specific about some of the things that I would change in order to get more people engaged. The first is registration. And it's not going to be done with a kiosk or a particular piece of hardware. It's going to be done by all of you talking it up and spreading way beyond this room. But it also is going to have to take some organization. And I've got a simple plan. Simply persuade President Crow and his counterparts at the other universities to make registration to vote part of freshman orientation. That will change dramatically. I've been here on campus trying to register voters. Between classes, well, it's almost impossible to get people who are rushing from one place to another to stop for 5 minutes and to sign up to vote. So we need to make it easier. Frankly, we need to make it much more accessible, and that's one way to do it, and I think the numbers would go up. The second one is a place called ASA, and I meant to congratulate student government for taking this on. Thank you for your leadership. But there's been an organization that's worked very hard to register students, and it has had the impact at the state legislature that they hear the student voices. In 2012, ASA registered 8,000 students on the campuses across Arizona. And the legislature noticed. You know how they noticed? They cut off all the funding for ASA. They made it illegal for the Board of Regents to cut a check to the organization that was registering students. So this year, how many got registered? 800. Cut the number to a minuscule proportion. Now, 80,000 students at ASU. I don't know exactly how many are registered, but I'm guessing it's a relatively small percentage of that total are registered voters in Arizona. If you want to have a say on the education that you're getting and the tuition you're paying and the kind of state we have, it's only by registering to vote and getting involved. And yet, the huge juggernaut power of student votes is basically on the sidelines, not participating. Not the folks in this room, but the overwhelming majority beyond it. And we have to change that. Let's talk about not suppressing the vote. I wish Senator Reagan had stayed, because she was the sponsor of something called 2305. in the last session, well, the session a year ago. She was very proud of it. But unfortunately, it was the biggest voter suppression bill that's ever been proposed, not just in Arizona, but across the country. It treated every group of voters, except her own, very poorly. It raised the number of signatures that Barry Hess's party should need, and he may say a little more about this. Libertarians were basically declared extinct by 2305. They would have had to put, I think, 5,000% more signatures to run for statewide office. That's wrong. It's unfair. It's un-American. It shouldn't have happened. It made initiatives and referendum, a precious right that we have in our Constitution, much more difficult to exercise. That's wrong. Now, fortunately, 150,000 Arizona citizens signed petitions, led by this guy over here, and basically said, we're going to put it on the ballot. What did the legislature do? Rather than let us vote on it, they promptly repealed 2305 and said, just watch, folks, it's coming back in pieces. So watch out. Many of our voter rights are in jeopardy right there. Let's talk about being fair to everybody. The legislature passed a bill you may have heard about in the last year called Senate Bill 1062. Basically said that private industry can discriminate against somebody that they don't like for religious reasons. That meant the gay and lesbian population felt that they were on trial. Now, they persuaded Governor Brewer to veto that bill. But Senator Reagan voted for it, and so did many others in the legislature. And that basically means you go into office, if she's the Secretary of State, already saying that some of our population don't have the same rights as others. I think that's wrong. Let's talk about dual track. You asked specifically about the question of out-of-state students. We have a system here in Arizona that was imposed on us last summer by the current Secretary of State, Ken Bennett. He basically said that we're going to have two classes of voters in Arizona. Those who file up with the Arizona form for registration, and those who sign up using the federal form for registration. Now, the Arizona form is somewhat different because it requires you to show documentary proof of citizenship, a birth certificate or naturalization papers or some other documentary proof. Well, many people who come from out of state didn't think to put their birth certificate in the suitcase, and so they signed up with a national form. And so what did Ken Bennett do? He said, well, you have to get a different ballot. You just vote for Congress for the federal issues. Now, there are 36 states in the United States that have the same citizenship requirement that we have here in Arizona. Only 2 of them have a dual-track system, Arizona and Kansas. So we're following Kansas in all things, apparently. The other 34 are waiting to see what happens in the federal courts because this plan is under challenge, I think for good and sufficient reason, because it takes away the rights of a large number of our fellow citizens. So they're waiting to get the final word. We're not. We spent a lot of money in the primary and now in the general election so that we have these 2 different ballots. I think that's wrong. And one of my first actions as your Secretary of State will be to get rid of the dual-track voting system. We should not have it in Arizona. Finally, let me talk briefly about dark money. I don't know if everybody's familiar. I find very often it sounds bad, but people don't know the details. Dark money means usually corporate funds that are being spent on elections, but they're not traceable. They're not identifiable. You don't know who the contributor was. And frankly, this is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan problem. In the last primary, both Republicans and Democrats got hammered by dark money forces. Many people feel that one of our major utilities here in Arizona was a big player, although because we allow dark money in Arizona, nobody will ever know whether APS was contributing to the defeat of some corporation candidates or not. I believe passionately that's wrong. We need absolute transparency, and my authority for that is none less than Justice Scalia, who has said he would not want to live in a country where political debate was held anonymously. So if Justice Scalia believes that, I believe the Supreme Court also believes that. And so we need in Arizona to stand up and demand that everyone who participates in the political process have the courage, have the forthrightness to say who they are and give us their names, their addresses, and so we know exactly who's behind every political expenditure. I'm absolutely committed to that. I'm asking for your help in making some major changes. The Secretary of State obviously doesn't just sit back and file papers. As the Chief Elections Officer, there are significant responsibilities for changing the access to voting in the state of Arizona, and that's exactly what I plan to do. I'm Terry Goddard, and I ask for your support. Thank you very much.